there's the day-to-day automation, kind of what ChatGPT will do for us right now, or any of the large language models. The ability to kind of help automate and supercharge your own individual productivity, I think is key. Whether that's through documentation, kind of like displaying of data and pulling from disparate resources, because right now our system is still fragmented, right? If you get a CT down the block from your private practice group, it won't always plug in to your primary care's EHR. We couldn't take care of that patient population even if we tried. We just don't have the people, we don't have the facilities, we don't have any of that. So how do we get expertise out there? I think it's kind of severalfold. I think partnering with great institutions who have excellent commitment to quality care is one of them. And taking our scientific know-how, especially in the areas that we know well, like cell therapy, radiopharmaceutical therapy, things like that, is paramount.
Nainesh, welcome to the show and Happy New Year. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks, Chris, for having me. It's exciting to be here. It's a fresh year, so resolutions abound.
Well, I'm sure this is the time for goal setting, and we'd love to hear more about your goals, both personal and professional, here as we get into it. Now, interesting, we met actually through a Genoplex colleague when you were attending the health conference in Las Vegas late last year, and so thanks for agreeing to jump on the show here. We're gonna dive into technology and your role. Maybe let's start there. Tell me about your role at Moffitt Cancer Center and what you do there.
Sure. Well, little introduction for those that don't know. Moffitt Cancer Center, an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center in the state of Florida. We're a standalone cancer center, so very similar to places like MD Anderson or Sloan Kettering, and all we do is adult cancer. We were started in 1986. Actually, H. Lee Moffitt was part of the Florida State Legislature. In 84, I think it was 84, he had an incredibly insightful idea to really dedicate resources to cancer therapy. And so we were born in 1986, which means we're actually pretty novel, if you can believe it. And in that time, I was thinking about this morning, I think we see about 28 to 29,000 new patients per year across our system. And, if you think about the number of patients that are treated or treatable, I'd say general rule of thumb is about 30%. So if you think, 30,000 just to make it easy, then 12,000 get treatment. And then above that, about 1,000 to 2,000 are on some sort of clinical trial here, which is, our mission is the prevention and cure of cancer. So the whole goal here is, how do we do that? How do we prevent and cure cancer? I came here about 10 years ago out of training. So 2016, I came as an interventional radiologist. And I really honestly came back then just to focus on cancer work. Because in my field, that's one of the areas that's really the forefront of innovation. I always knew I wanted to focus on GU, so genitourinary diseases. And back then, I came to focus on kidney cancer and prostate cancer. 2017, the year after I got here, I started the program around something called prostate artery embolization. It's for men with enlarged prostates. But the real tilt there was using it in the setting of prostate cancer. And so that's been really my career's work, especially on the clinical and research side. I'm running an IDE, so investigational device exemption trial, prospective trial for utilizing PAE in the setting of prostate cancer. We're the only one in the world right now. And that's not, tooting my own horn, not saying I'm the only one who's probably got enough patients to deal with getting the IDE for the material that we use during the procedure. That's, as you can tell, probably my life's passion. Certainly taking care of oncology patients is something I love, and taking care of men who've got prostate cancer, I consider it an honor. But what also happened was, I've got a background that's a little bit non-traditional. I did not always start in medicine. I had previous career on Wall Street and then went to business school at the same time in medical school. When I came here, one of the opportunities they gave me was to start having more and more administrative responsibility. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I became the assistant chief medical officer, and I focused on digital innovation, strategy, and finance. And then about 2 years ago, I started overseeing our clinical partnerships and clinical expansion. And then about 6 months ago, I became the vice president, chief clinical expansion and partnership officer. And so now I really focus on how we bring the Moffitt care that we know at our current facilities, and how do we bring that closer to patients away from our central facilities. And then how do we do that organically? How do we do that in affiliation? How do we do that in partnership with other great institutions and organizations?
So you mentioned this sort of non-traditional approach and how you got to Moffitt. So when people ask you why you chose a career or why you pivoted to a career at Moffitt in cancer care, I mean, what's the answer you give people?
Well, mixed bag. I'd say the real answer is it was something I felt that I could make a lasting impact, or it was a mechanism for me to make a lasting impact on society. So I'm fortunate, my parents worked hard and they had the opportunity to help me with my education, and I felt very, very, really thankful for that. And I thought, okay, so how can I pay that forward? Cancer is one of those things that we just don't know enough about right now. Certain cancers are very treatable, but by and large, especially when it's stage 4, it becomes a chronic disease at best. If not, it's just a little bit of a ticking time bomb. So knowing that, I think, and knowing just in general, the ability to help people through being a physician was the main reason I became a physician. Focusing on cancer really came down to the interesting science around it and the unique ways in which we could use interventional radiology and our techniques to help treat cancer. What I mean by that is, I'd say 50, 60, 70 years ago, there was either medication, typically IV, or surgery. Then radiation oncology became a field, interventional radiology became a field, and all these fields started merging and kind of combining and working together to improve outcomes for patients. And that was really what piqued my interest. So it was really the pivot was around helping people, and then dedicating to oncology was around just the science of it. I find it fascinating.
You have an amazing role at Moffitt, as you mentioned, being still a practicing sort of interventional radiologist and also having these administrative duties that continue to evolve with more digital innovation focus. So what would you say is the thing that you enjoy the most about working at Moffitt?
Most notably, it's the patients. I would say that our patients are always very thankful. They welcome and trust us. And I think that's actually a very, very beneficial environment for any, clinician to work in. So more than anything, I just love taking care of our patients. Secondarily, it's the people. My colleague clinicians, it's really a collaborative environment. Our frontline staff really go above and beyond. And that was actually the thing that I noticed when I interviewed here as a fellow. I just couldn't believe the special sauce for people and how they wanted to be here. Not to go too far off on a tangent, unfortunately, I lost my mom from cancer a little over a year ago. But to that degree, I put money where my mouth was. So she was a cancer patient here. Even people that didn't know me at the time went above and beyond. She got great care here, and what she liked about it was that people paid attention to her. She didn't feel like a number. She herself was a physician, so she knew exactly what was happening. Really just a brutally challenging time for her, for obviously our family. And it really shone through that the people at Moffitt that take care of patients day in and day out, you just can't beat it. So for me, between the patients and the people, nothing is better. And the ability to kind of take care of patients as a clinician, but also impact, our almost 10,000 person workforce under our awesome CEO, Patrick Hu. What could be better?
Let's stay with that theme for just a moment around patients. How does staying close to patients in your day-to-day care as a physician, how does that impact the other decisions you make throughout the day administratively or in your role in clinical, expanding clinical partnerships? How does that help you?
Well, I think what it really does is it gives you a North Star, right? So any administrative or non-clinical decision that gets made, and this is true of anything we do in our life. If you're going to go on a trip, what's the reason you're going on a trip? Why do you pick a destination? If your child is going to school, what is the goal you're trying to accomplish? Is it just a good school? Is it a school that fits him or her, et cetera, et cetera? So having that North Star, I think, is incredibly key. So for me, not only in making decisions, but in preparing materials and analyzing different, risk return ratios or return on investment ratios, it's easy because I see patients every day and I know what our colleagues are going through. It becomes very easy to simply say, okay, is this good for patients? And is this good for my clinician colleagues? And in that order. And the third thing can be, is it a financially sound decision? You could exchange clinician for research colleagues, at any point, or you can combine them. But the point is that it allows you to kind of have that algorithm very systematically all the time. And I think a lot of people say that they adhere to that. But for me, that makes it very easy to kind of cut through the nonsense. Is it good for patients? Could I see myself, my colleagues, anybody that I'm working with getting behind a decision, a program, a platform, an endeavor? Is it good for our clinicians? Is it good for our researchers? Is it good for the people here? And then lastly, does it make financial sense? And for me, I think that's great because lots of things can make financial sense or lots of things can be great for our clinicians. But if it doesn't service the other two, it's very hard.
In your clinical experience, Nainesh, what do patients and their families most often misunderstand or underestimate as they go along their care journeys?
Honestly, I think what gets underestimated is sometimes we just don't know. We don't know how patients will respond. We don't know why one patient responds or another patient doesn't respond. We don't know why a patient's having a fever, even if we can't find an infection. We don't know why the tumor's progressing. We don't know why a patient feels like total garbage. I think that is something that has really humbled me personally. And it's something that the longer you do this, the more quickly you can comfortably say, listen, I just don't know. What I do know is we want to try to get you to the hospital and make sure you're safe. What I do know is we need, I got a feeling that we got to stop treatment or we can keep going with treatment, right? But a lot of times I catch myself saying to patients, you know what, I don't know. And what I found is the earlier you can deliver that message to a patient that there's just so much going on that you just don't know, the better off you are. But honestly, I think, and even we did, I spoke earlier about my mom. When you're on the other side of the table, really, you just can't underestimate what we don't know.
Well, listen, thank you for sharing the story about your mom as well. And I'm sorry about her passing. I know that weighs heavily on a child. And I also had the passing of my dad this past year to prostate cancers, which is which is an area you know very well. So I think it's one of the two areas you said that you really have expertise as a GU physician as his focus. So give us some hope here. What do you see? What progress in cancer care in the next few years gives you the most hope as a physician in treating patients with prostate cancer?
Absolutely. So I would say two areas. The first area is our commitment to screening and prevention. And when I say I don't mean just the healthcare establishment. I mean patients. The total body scanning companies, and for the purposes of the discussion, I'll leave specific company names out. It's been an interesting kind of dilemma, right? No group, no scientific community has said, go out there and get your entire body scanned with a CT, scan with an ultrasound, scan with a MRI. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, those companies are growing and growing quickly, which means there's demand. And that demand is really at the consumer level, which again, to me, goes back to my first comment, that as a society, we are interested in screening and prevention. We do not believe, and we know that the best way to cure cancer is to detect it early, right? That I think is a remarkable trend. I believe the stat that I learned, and I need to go double check this, but I believe the stat that I learned was that of eligible women in the country, only like 75% of them get mammograms. Now, my mom was a radiologist. I remember as a young man in high school, I helped her develop film. But I remember when she was doing the mammography, it wasn't comfortable for women. It does not look comfortable. They compress the breast. It's not fun. It's obviously angst provoking. But back then, I think it was 75%. With the new scanning, and that's just not, imaging, a lot of blood testing, a lot of stool testing, colonoscopy, appointments. People are actually interested in knowing early, never mind for all diseases, but specifically for cancer, if they've got anything. And I think that is really inspiring. The fact that Americans are interested, the fact that people are flocking to ways in which they can really get their arms around it, the fact that people are doing all the things with the wearables, the fact that people are interested in diet, I think it's great. And I think that is the way that we can make the impact and the dent on cancer. Because anything we can do to improve screening, anything we can do to improve prevention, the information around if you're high risk and you should be screening even more, I think that is all wonderful. So knowing is great. The second thing I'm excited about, particularly for those people with metastatic disease, and you shared that about your dad, and I'm sorry you went through it, and you know, I know what it feels like. When it's metastatic and it's stage 4, the ability for us to use therapies that are not absolutely awful, I think is exciting. Whether that's cellular and immunotherapy, that's the bite therapy for all the bloodborne pathologies, radiopharmaceuticals, and just the burgeoning of that field. I think it's really fascinating to be able to say, you know what, we're going to use specific tumor markers to target our therapy, and we're going to take advantage of the body's kind of immune mechanisms. I think that is beyond exciting. And to me, the work that's getting done in those areas is really, really, really inspiring because I think we're just scratching the surface.
Well, we're going to pivot here for a moment, Nainesh, because I think these therapies and the promise that you've just described is awesome, but we know that many patients, for many different reasons, never get to a treatment center like Moffitt to be able to get access to these types of therapies. So I know one of your roles that you said is focusing on expanding access to care. So what does bringing cancer care closer to patients look like for you?
Yeah. So I think there's a few different prongs, right? I think in the first place, places like Moffitt have to be clear about how we can take expertise and deliver it out. You know, even if we're not taking care of every single patient, by the math, I think there's, I don't know, 120, 130 new cancer cases in Florida annually. That's just Florida. And that's based on a calculation of per 100,000 incidents and things like that. We couldn't take care of that patient population even if we tried, right? We just don't have the people, we don't have the facilities, we don't have any of that. So how do we get expertise out there, right? I think it's kind of severalfold. I think partnering with great institutions who have excellent commitment to quality care is one of them. And taking our scientific know-how, especially in the areas that we know well, like cell therapy, radiopharmaceutical therapy, things like that, is paramount. Number 2, I think, how can we get more patients into our system so that we can get them on more clinical trials? Because those are going to answer the questions that we're asking. And then thirdly, I think, how do we use digital tools and digital technology to help answer some of these questions? And so whether that's through remote patient monitoring, bringing care closer to home, or it's through analytics from robust data that we acquire as we bring care into the community through partnership or organically, I think that's the way that that my office has kind of been designed and how I've thought about it so that we can really impact care. And that to me is one of the only ways. I think there's also got to be an acknowledgement that there's great physicians, great institutions out there, even me, myself, in my own specialty, as far as prostate cancer and genitourinary cancers. I love going to other institutions and seeing people think about innovative ways to treat prostate cancer patients because we don't know all the answers, right? So for me, bringing care closer to home has to have multiple prongs. It's not as easy as just setting up a Moffitt facility down the block from every single patient in Florida. I wish we could do the McDonald's way, but it's not going to work.
Well, it's interesting. Your background and in your role, technology can solve some of these problems and won't solve all the problems. And I know you're looking at those. And we know there's a lot of talk about AI in healthcare as well, and not every tech solution needs to be AI. But in simple terms, how do you think the use of technology can help physicians in their sort of day-to-day clinical workflows?
Yeah, I think there's probably multiple facets. So I think, there's the day-to-day automation, kind of what ChatGPT will do for us right now, or any of the large language models. The ability to kind of help automate and supercharge your own individual productivity, I think, is key. Whether that's through documentation, kind of like displaying of data and pulling from disparate resources, because right now our system is still fragmented, right? If you get a CT down the block from your private practice group, it won't always plug in to your primary care's EHR. And so how do we just get the information up to date and displayed accurately? It's that simple. And then on top of that, I think there's going to be augmented diagnostics. So how can we use the technology to help us as clinicians digest even more information, right? Because the problem is, like a lot of things in life right now, I think as a clinician, you've just got information overload. You've got publications coming at you. There's no more print journals. You don't even have time to read. You don't even have time to look at the new articles. Even if you're on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever the new information is coming out, how can you really be up to date, right?
Mm.
So I think AI will help clinicians stay afloat, stay up to date, really distill down information into digestible tidbits, especially as we get inundated with information about everything else in the world. And then the last area I think is the ability to have predictive impact. So some solutions right now are being built to identify treatment response in specific lesions throughout the body, right? So for a given patient on a given regimen, is all the cancer responding the same? Are some areas responding the same? If they're not responding the same, what should we do? Right. And I think that's incredibly necessary. But then the flip side of that is how do we really embrace technology to start helping us predict outcomes? Whether it's combinations of medications, it's the patient profile that will lead to more toxicity after immune modulated therapies. I mean, the list goes on and on. And as we get better about asking our questions, I think that's where AI will really help.
It's interesting. I was at a cancer conference just before the holidays, and I was speaking to a transplant physician who said that I asked him the same question, and he was, AI is great and everything. And so I think, it's helping physicians with their workflow and making some aspects of their day easier, but it's also then made parts of their day more difficult. And the example he gave, Nainesh, was that as patients have more access to their charts and their personal information and their medical records, he says so AI is saving some time, but he's spending more time dealing with more patient requests about what he perceives as some things are very important, but some things being very minor or trivial. Like don't worry about this particular lab value. He gets, so patients are so involved now, having access to their charts, right? Think about the new burden on how that just, as patients become more curious, right? I don't know if that's something you're aware of or here.
No, absolutely. But want to know my response to that, and I don't want to give the farm away, but Moffitt is potentially looking at a solution. Like we've developed a solution. What if there was a version of me that could handle 80% of those comments?
Got it.
That's
Yep.
AI based,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That would make things even better. So I get what he's saying. He's absolutely right. Or she, I don't know if it's male or female, but I understand what that physician is saying. They're absolutely right because the availability of the information is so clear now. On the flip side, though, I think, it's limitless as far as how, if we could really train like an avatar of me around prostate cancer, and imagine that when your father was alive, if you could have asked a me and another person from Sloan Kettering and another person, and you could have said, hey, what would you do in this situation?
Right.
And if all three of us had given you the same result, well, then maybe you would have said, like, okay, I mean, I feel a lot more comfortable. Or if we had given three disparate results, you could have said, hey, you know what? I mean, you're a very smart guy. You could have started going down the rabbit hole, looking at all the sources and saying, well, you know what? I actually do want to go talk to Dr. Parikh because he's thinking about this a little bit differently and it makes sense for me. And this goes back to my feeling that we really don't know a lot of things, especially when it comes to cancer. You got to go with the clinicians you trust. You got to be your own advocate. You've got to be your loved one's advocate, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
I think
So that's where I think that's how I would respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. I think that a lot of patients, though, even those with strong caregiver support systems, they still struggle with many of the logistics of healthcare. So one aspect is knowing, being aware of what you need and what your referring physician maybe tells you to do, go to Moffitt, whatnot. But one of the issues with my dad, for example, was it took almost 3 months to get him scheduled for this particular type of advanced therapy that they wanted to give him. And then by the time he was able to get scheduled, he was already transitioning. Yep. So it just took, maybe it would have helped him, but it was so far down the road that I think those are some of the issues that affect the, when we say access to care, I think those are still a lot of the challenges many patients and their families face, right?
Yeah. So you're 1,000% correct. I mean, as a person who's an oncologist, an administrative, an executive, the amount of energy I had to expend getting my mom in for a clinical trial that we wanted to run was just shocking. right? And I had access to plenty of tools and
Yep.
people, great resources.
Yep.
And even still, I felt like it couldn't happen quickly enough. And so your point is well taken around access, which, by the way, leads me to the first comment, which is where I'm hopeful in that people are now far more aware and far more involved and engaged in screening prevention and often in their own care, which is part of the reason I like it here at Moffitt. I mean, I welcome men. I give them my email all the time, my patients, not my cell because my cell is always on silent. And I say, email me with anything you got. I welcome the questions because I think if I'm on the other side, I want to ask those questions, right? And I think I do give most patients the benefit of the doubt. They're going to be respectful. They know that there's other
Mhm.
patients. But, when you're scared and when you don't know, you want to know. On the flip side, you bring up a really good point. Aging population, shortages in all the specialties. Radiology is no exception. Medical oncology is no exception. People are living longer. They're living longer with their illness. How do you improve access? And I wish I had a magic bullet. I wish I had an answer. That's part of the reason I feel impassioned to work as an administrator and as an executive. It's part of the reason I feel impassioned to work for something called Cancer X, which we may or may not get into. I think there's still so many on the ground barriers. And even if it's not getting access to a clinical appointment, what about getting into clinical trials? What about clinical trials being open? What about clinical trials being funded? You know, I mean, the list goes on and on if we all agree that clinical trials is one of the main ways that cancer therapies are innovated. So I don't have a great answer. I hope that we can find, you know, more efficient access. Maybe it's through triage, maybe it's through telling patients, and
Mm.
I'm sure you wouldn't like to hear this, but perhaps there's a situation in which you say, listen, oh, you have prostate cancer, it's slow growing, you can wait 2 months. But obviously you would say, no, that's not true. Anybody who gets hit with the diagnosis, even of suspected cancer, the flags go up, the alarm sirens go off. You want to do something now. And the truth of the matter is, I don't know exactly how you solve the access problem. I do think that leaning more towards screening and prevention will help in the long run.
Well, let's spend the last few minutes we have together, Nainesh, looking ahead. So
Sure.
let's be visionaries and with someone with your type of background and so diverse. Let's talk first about your work at Cancer X because I feel like that's probably a project that you contribute to that helps look at some of these solutions. So tell us a little bit about Cancer X and what you do there.
Sure. So Cancer X is really a fantastic program. And for anybody that doesn't know it, type in Cancer X and you'll to the search engine of your choice and you'll go get a lot out of it. Originally started actually a little over 3 years ago, now 4 years ago. And it was out of what was then the Jill Biden moonshot, which was to reduce cancer mortality by a significant factor. I keep meaning to look it up and I forget, but it was something ridiculous, like 50% in 20 years, right? Cancer X specifically was a public private partnership out of the Jill Biden moonshot, which was also a public private partnership, but focused on using digital tools to reduce financial toxicity for patients who and their loved ones when they have a cancer diagnosis. So it was started back then, and it's really a consortium model. Healthcare systems, small businesses, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, investors really have committed to being a part of this consortium slash ecosystem so that we can drive down cancer mortality using digital tools. That's really what Cancer X is. There are multiple programs as a part of Cancer X. Moffitt has been the lead healthcare organization, kind of helping run the program. But I have to say, our other healthcare partners are fantastic. Atrium Health has been one. Atrium Advocate has been a huge partner of ours right from the beginning. Rush has been in there. Sloan Kettering has been in there. It keeps going, and really, it's been a fantastic partnership and ecosystem that we're building. J&J, Flare Capital, I mean, just goes on and on. Oncology Ventures. What my role has been, which is why I'm so excited, every year one of the flagship programs that we run is an accelerator for digital health companies. The application usually starts around September and through, September, October, November, December. Companies will go through an application process and a pitch process, and then we select 10 to 15, give or take, to be part of our accelerator cohort. This is our third year that we're doing this. So we're in selection process now. And really what we look to do is we try to accelerate companies into our cohort by pairing them with healthcare systems, investors, pharmaceutical companies, so that, one of two things happens. Either they get excellent feedback, pilots or investments or whatever it is, so that they can really supercharge their technologies and their offerings so that we can get it to patients sooner. Or they find out early that maybe it's just not a good idea. These are intelligent people, these are motivated, passionate people, but let's get them information so that they can make the decision on whether or not it's important for them to continue spending their time on something. And for me, that's been incredible. We will announce, just a quick plug while I have it, we will announce the cohort. Now I have to take it back. We will have a networking reception at JP Morgan. I think we announced the cohort at Vive in Los Angeles in February. For anybody interested, contact me and I'll get the information for sure. But suffice it to say, the next couple of months is going to be really exciting.
No, well, thanks for sharing that. And that means, I mean, you have now an awareness of a lot of the startup companies in the tech space and who are trying to achieve that very ambitious goal of driving down cancer mortality. So when you fast forward now, let's say to 5 years from now, Nainesh, what change in cancer care do you hope, based on all this knowledge of where medicine is going and the care of patients, what change in cancer care do you hope patients will feel most directly in that time frame?
That's a great question. I feel like 5 years is too slow. I don't know that we're going to have something. But you know what? What I hope is that with the digital tools available, there will be such a growth in the digital suite that you can plug in your information and hopefully get spit out your risk profile, your genetic scoring around if you're going to develop cancer, never mind the best places for you to go for a given cancer if you're worried about it. That's what I hope in the next 5 years. So, it's less about, this is the brand reputation of a great cancer center, maybe like Moffitt, and more about, listen, if you've got kind of a refractory leukemia and you're 60, Moffitt is running the most clinical trials in that specialty. You may want to check them out, even if you're living in Washington, right? To me, that transparency and that availability of the information and that kind of at a moment's notice, again, think about it. Our ability to plan a trip to the South Pole, it's pretty easy now, right? You just hop on, again, search engine of your choice, the language model of your choice, ask AI, and you've got an itinerary and call it 30 seconds. You can't do that with your risk profile for cancer. You can't do that with your blood testing. You can't plug it in and say, okay, so what should I worry about? And this is just oncology, never mind cardiac disease and cardiovascular disease. So I hope that within 10 years or 5 years, you said, I hope that has, that curve is really just super steep and people are combined with the intellectual curiosity. I hope that we get to the point where you can just kind of put in your information, you can put in your ethnicity, your gender, whatever it is that we need to put in, your nutritional profile, and hopefully you can start getting information about your risk. You can start getting information about if you've got a suspected diagnosis, what you need to do. You can even get information about what the recommended screening parameters are or the recommended treatment parameters are. To me, that ability to get that information quickly, I think would be the most impactful.
So finally, last question, Nainesh, for all the patients and caregivers out there in this audience who are listening and who maybe feel overwhelmed today with their struggle, maybe they're looking for alternative treatment options. What's one message you'd want for them to hear and take away from this show from someone who's inside a major cancer center?
The main message I would say is that, again, we don't know. What does that mean? To me, that means be the advocate, patient, loved one. Don't just assume that one specific institution or physician is going to know everything. And I'm not saying don't trust your physician. In fact, I tell all my patients, if you don't trust me, tell me. Let's get you someone you do trust, because that's where it all starts. But advocate, do your own research, use these tools that are available. And believe me, you'll be shocked at what you can find. The ability, I'll finish with a quick story. My mom received a phase 1 clinical trial drug. At the time, she had a mutation for her cancer. And I scoured. I mean, I talked to multiple med-oncs. I asked over and over and over what would be the best thing. And at the time, there was, again, I'll leave the name out. there was a drug that was a targeted mutation. It was an oral pill. And she hated the chemo, and the chemo was awful. I reached out through LinkedIn to the chief medical officer, the associate chief medical officer. I reached out to my network. I got responses, and I got her plugged into the trial. And, for a couple of months, it helped. And she was happy to be off the chemo. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her disease, and, it didn't have a long-lasting effect. But my point is, she made the decision whether or not she wanted to go on the trial, but I found it for her. And using social media, using every tool available to me, was able to find out. Now, granted, as we talked about, obviously I'm inside the facilities and things like that. But I have to say, in that moment, I didn't feel like a physician. I just felt like a child trying to do what was best for my mom. And I think that is something that every major institution will embrace. And I'm sure, you feel the same way. Every clinician, every institution will embrace. If you're trying to advocate, let's hear it. And I think that's where the hope is, because we just don't know.
What a powerful message and a powerful way to end today's show. I think it's inspiring for patients and anyone listening. I think healthcare has always been about being your own advocate. And I think your story will resonate with a lot of folks, and hopefully there's a lot here for people to take away. So
sure.
Want to thank you for being a guest on the show today, Nainesh, and I wish you all the best in the new year.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for having me. I think what you guys are doing is really incredible. I love that you're offering an outlet for patients to hear directly from people in the space. I think it's great. Keep up the good work, and thank you so much for having me.
Talk to you again soon. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow RX for Biotech on your favorite podcasting streaming platform, and subscribe on our YouTube channel to listen to more episodes just like this. And finally, if you or someone has just received a difficult diagnosis, especially a cancer diagnosis, we know that it can be overwhelming. And you hear the words, you hear the diagnosis, but you're left with lots of questions. Well, therapyforme.ai helps you through the journey, helps you take that next step. It helps empower you with the right information to know what questions to ask your providers to help you find a specialist near you that can help. There's no long waits, no guesswork, just clearer answers and a path forward. If you're looking for care, alternative treatment options, or just to find a specialist, or just need to be connected to a nurse navigator who can help answer some of your questions, start at therapyforme.ai. Thanks for listening.